Good evening. Welcome to the Appellate Division First Department. Thank you all for coming. We are delighted that you have decided to spend your Monday evening with us celebrating Women's History Month. Tonight's program, a spotlight on moving justice forward, women in the law and judiciary, is part of my Justice Forward initiative, which is excellently led by Justice Bahati Pitt, who also chairs our court's anti-bias committee. Thank you, Justice Pitt. As the saying goes, knowledge is power. And this evening brings together a panel of influential women leaders at different stages in their careers and different areas of practice. Tonight, these outstanding women will engage in a lively discussion where they will share their knowledge and experience in the practice of law that will provide guidance to law students and young lawyers on how to navigate successful careers. Before I turn it over to Justice Pitt, I want to thank each one of the speakers in particular for being here. I know it will be excellent. We are so glad that you have taken the time to be here. And of course, our own Justice Yanette Rosado for moderating. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's program, A Spotlight in Moving Justice Forward, Women in the Law and the Judiciary. Tonight's event is actually part of a series of programs that we're doing here at the First Department under the Justice Forward program, which was started by our presiding Justice, Diane Renwick. So our first program was in February, where we celebrated Black History Month and highlighted issues surrounding the need for increased representation of Black men in the law and the judiciary. Tonight's program, although just a week shy of Women's History Month, will highlight the contributions and issues facing women in the law and the judiciary. In June, we hope that you join us again as we celebrate Pride and the contributions and issues concerning our colleagues within the LGBTQ+ community. So as we continue our programming, we endeavor to spotlight, inspire, and serve as a model in New York City and throughout the state on noteworthy and necessary discussions. Today, we are joined by some phenomenal women, most of whom I know personally, and they have influenced me on my path on the bench and throughout my legal career. We have in the middle here, the Honorable Verner Saunders, President of the Association of Supreme Court Justices of the State of New York. Susan Coleman, President of the New York City Bar Association, right here to my immediate right. Savina Plater, President of the Bronx Women's Bar Association. Dianis Beth Akiye, Associate Director of the Office of Judicial Careers at Columbia University. And tonight's panel will be moderated by the Appellate Division First Department's Associate Justice Yanette Rosado, who was recently appointed as co-chair of the New York State in Women in the Courts Committee. Before we start our program, I just want to acknowledge one of the justices from our court who's also here and, historical as a woman in her own right, the Honorable Barbara Kapnick. Oh, and another justice, another woman, also in her own right, historical, Honorable Kelly O'Neill Levy. So thank you for joining us. We'll get started.
Can everyone hear me? Yes. So thank you again for being with us today. There's many places you could be tonight, but you chose to be with us, and we appreciate it. Also, get ready for the ride, because we have 4 fabulous women you're going to hear from. With that said, we are in April, but it is my belief that every month is Women's History Month. I'm going to start slow, and the first question I want to know is, what was your path to the law? I'm going to start on this side and then come back, generally.
Generally, I would say my path to the law was pretty traditional. I went essentially straight from college to law school to, to ultimately to a firm where I stayed for 25 years, from when I was a summer associate, had my 3 boys, became a partner, and then that firm went through a series of mergers and went to my current firm, which is Jenner & Block, where I've been for 17 years as a partner and a litigator.
We're going to explore that a little bit further.
I'm sure.
Judge Saunders?
Generally, my path to the law was traditional with a few spaces and timeouts, if you will, because I wasn't originally planning to become a lawyer. I wanted to be a profiler for serial killers with the FBI.
I told you.
And I thought about it, and I was like, wow, this is so super cool. And my background from undergraduate was psychology, so I worked a few years. I worked in juvenile detention. I worked with folks who were transitioning from public assistance into the workforce, and I worked with teenagers in foster care in the, graduating out of foster care. And I was in family court a lot, and I testified a lot. And I would be somewhat, chagrined when the attorneys came to talk to me for 2 seconds, and I was the social worker on the case for years and got a snapshot of information and go in and have an appearance for what I felt was far too brief. And I was like, I think I need to do this job. And then that's what led me to law school and ultimately to the bench.
I have to stop for a moment. So you weren't even thinking about the bench, but you saw a need and you pivoted, correct?
I pivoted and I thought that I could certainly be of use because one judge in particular in family court in Manhattan, New York County, she says, do you want to admit that into evidence? Casebook. And I was like, no. And I was like, I know it. Backwards and forwards. I know all about these children. And it's fine.
So you saw a need and you said, I'm going to fill it.
And that judge thought, well, that's really pretty cool. And let's hear from you. Like, so this is what you believe. And so that conversation with her thereafter, yes, showed that there was a definite need. And I thought that this is something that I can do.
Thank you, Judge. Ms. Plater?
First of all, I want to shout out all my Bronx folks here, and especially some of our board of directors members or officers are here, so thank you for coming. Your support of the First Department programs, but for me and the Bronx Men's Bar Association, I appreciate it. To answer your question, so I wanted to work for the United Nations, and it was really because my ace was my father, and I didn't have the traditional route. So I want to tell you a little bit about my background.
Don't do that, because I don't cry pretty, and then it's not going to look good. So please, I'm going to turn this way.
There's not going to be any crying today. It's a celebration, really. So I am one step removed from working on a farm. And my father, who was born in Guyana, post-colonial country, at 11 years old, he was working on this farm. And he asked to go to school. And that's the reason why I'm a lawyer today. Because I could have been on that farm. So, some fun times. I was born in a town called New Amsterdam. And in this town, it was an elite town. Lawyers, judges, businessmen, they were all men. And I grew up in a society where my competitors were boys. But my father had a different plan. In his household, he really tried to have my sister and I learn everything. So I grew up playing cricket. I have the scars of my days playing cricket in the streets. And I grew up learning about the opera. And there were libraries in my home. There was a library down the street from my home. There was a hospital in my town. And I had everything that I needed to succeed from years 1 to 15, because I was in Guyana until I was 15 years old. So I went through schooling in Guyana. But at my home,
You have to speak into your mic, I'm being told.
Or move it closer up.
at my home, there was something progressive happening. My mother and my father were partners. And outside of my home, men controlled, dominated their homes, their children, their wives. So very early on, I understood what dominance was, what abuse was, what lack of control was, lack of choices for a woman, not having earning power. And my mother was one of the few women in my town that worked. So I played lawn tennis with the boys, and I fought with the boys. And I broke all the rules, and my father let me. So my father became my ace. Years later, I would come to understand how important that is for a girl, for a woman, because the one thing I didn't lack was self-confidence. I didn't lack self-esteem. And as I grew, that would serve me well. So my father, at 11 years old, begged to go to school and went on this path. He became the chief labor officer. Then he became the minister of labor. Then he became permanent secretary. And then he represented Guyana at the International Labor Organization in Geneva, Switzerland. So when he traveled, he brought everything back and exposed me and my sister to everything. So that, in a long nutshell, is how I started my journey to law school. But it started with my goal of wanting to follow in my father's footstep of working for the United Nations, working with the International Labor Organization. So I studied labor law in law school. I was a Peggy Browning Fellow. And then I met Justice Bahati Pitt and Judge Eddie McShann and Judge Latia Martin. And I got exposed to family law and matrimonial. So before I went to law school, I actually did a master's in public administration. And I lived in Georgia, and I worked for the Georgia Commission on Equal Opportunity.
I don't want you to go deeper into that because we're going to explore it.
Okay?
We've been waiting for you.
Thank you. I like to say that, like Captain America, I'm just a kid from Brooklyn, right? I was born and raised in Sunset Park. My mom and my dad are from Panama. And in addition to them, I spent a lot of my childhood with my great-grandmother who passed away last year. And with my great-grandmother, Francia, I would spend a lot of time watching Caso Cerrado, right? Which, if any of you have not had the chance to watch it, it is the Spanish language Judge Judy, but you were saying that we brought the sazon, right? Yeah. With a little bit of sazon, right? Yeah. Exactly, a little adobo. And so when I was a child, I would say often, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a judge. But the reality is, I didn't know any lawyers, I didn't know any judges, unless, of course, you counted La Doctora Ana Maria Polo, right? And so as a result, I think I had this sort of fantasy idea of what the law would be. And that fantasy idea carried me through my schooling here. I went to an all-girls Catholic school in Brooklyn, where I learned so much about what it meant to be a woman who felt empowered, a young woman empowered by choices and empowered by the world. I went to Harvard, where I studied English, and when I had my 4 fantastic years at Harvard, I came back to Brooklyn, and I saw a world and a borough that was very, very different from the world that I remembered in high school. In part, of course, because of rising housing costs, in part because of my neighborhood and the way that the composition of it had changed so drastically. And I think that as I thought about my neighborhood, and I thought about the people, the businesses, the households that all were within the borough, I realized that I had loved studying English because of the storytelling that I was able to really figure out, but the stories were here and the stories needed to be told, right? And often those stories were being told in all the wrong ways. And so I ended up going back to Massachusetts, where I had another 3 fantastic years at Harvard, was part of the Legal Aid Bureau, where I did a lot of work in civil legal aid, including housing and family defense. And so when I think about the path to the law, I think about it first in terms of my family and all of the really wonderful opportunities that they gave me. But second, I think about it in terms of these 2 places that have really raised me, right? I think about Brooklyn and all of the diversity in every sort of cross-section that exists in the borough. And then I think about Cambridge, Massachusetts, right? Where I had this enormous privilege to be able to go to Harvard twice, right? And thinking about what that meant for me, for my family, and ultimately for the people who did not have that opportunity, but who really needed the legal help.
So now you told us what initially got you at the door of law. How did your experiences in law school, whether good or bad, as a woman, inform your legal career?
That's a really wonderful question. I think about law school and my time at Harvard, especially, in 2 main pillars. Of course, I was in class, right? And I know my mom might be watching, so I was definitely in class. But the 2 main parts that I spent my time doing were, 1, my work at the Harvard Legal Aid Bureau, and then 2, my work as a resident tutor. So for 2 of the years that I was in law school, I lived with the undergraduates in one of Harvard's 12 resident houses, which meant in that opportunity, I was advising, I was mentoring, and I think really that was a perfect complement to my work in law school, in part because the students thought that whatever I did was so cool, right? I could come back from a trial and think, oh man, that was a tough day. And they'd be like, wow, you were in court, right? That's incredible. Or alternatively, I could come out of my federal courts exam and be like, wow, that was a lot. And they'd be like, wow, I can't wait to take federal courts. And I'm like, really, actually? But I think having the opportunity to learn from them and to also learn from my clients at the Legal Aid Bureau shaped my perspective on what it meant to be a lawyer, but more importantly, what it meant to be a mentor within the law, right? As I mentioned earlier, I have no lawyers in my family, so I'm a first-generation lawyer. And I think for a long time, I got used to seeing myself as a mentee and someone who was really eager to receive advice and guidance, and I still am. But those experiences made it clear to me that as a lawyer, even as a baby lawyer, you really have to be in it for mentorship and thinking not just about yourself, but about the people who are coming after you.
So you're lifting as you climb.
That's exactly right.
Ms. Plater, you just told us that Dad got you to the law, in a nutshell. Watching him, watching what he did, how he did it, that's what you wanted to do. So now you're in law school. The fact that you were a woman, did that impact your law school? Or how did your experiences in law school inform your legal career? Did you know you were going to be this fabulous family court practitioner? What were your thoughts and how did it impact you?
So during law school, I started working with InMotion, and some of you know InMotion.
Can you say briefly what InMotion is?
So InMotion it doesn't exist anymore, but it was a program that allowed students and young lawyers, newly graduated lawyers, to gain experience while doing pro bono work in the area of matrimonial law, family law, right, custody, visitation, and the like. So that's one of the things that really helped me because, so back in Guyana, I'd seen Indian women being treated very poorly. It didn't sit well with me. So fast forward to my college at CUNY School of Law, I enrolled in something called Honors in Western Tradition. So this is where I'm learning political theory, I'm learning about Hobbes, Voltaire, the like, and at the same time, I am learning about the Bronte sisters, right? Feminist theory. I enroll in another minor called Women's Rights, Women's History. So I'm learning about Caribbean women authors, Caribbean political theorists. And now I'm thinking, it's shaping me that maybe I'm not gonna go to law school, but maybe I wanna be some kind of woman activist, an advocate for Indian women in particular. So this is something that I start doing with In Motion in Queens, New York, because that's where my Indian community is, right? Little India, Little Guyana. So I start working pro bono with women who are victims of domestic violence. And then in law school, I take this family law class in the Bronx, right? It has a component of an externship. So while I'm getting credits, I'm actually in the Bronx Family Court, and I am also seeing the changes of the faces in the courtroom. I'm looking out and seeing people that look like me. So again, this is making me think about, okay, this advocacy thing that you want to do, maybe this is what it needs to be shaped around. So now I graduate from Queens College, which has an excellent program. It's part of CUNY. And I go to Georgia, and I start working at the Georgia Commission on Equal Opportunity. And here I'm investigating for the entire state of Georgia housing discrimination complaints and employment discrimination complaints. And who do I see? People that look like me. So this is kind of beginning to develop a theme in my life. It wasn't a straight path to law school. By the time I had come to law school, I was already working. I had earned a master's in public administration at night, and I knew that I wanted to work with Indian women in some shape or form. So I start to think about where are the organizations that serving Indian women, and how can I help?
Thank you. Judge Saunders, I'm very intrigued by your social worker past because I feel like I've known you a long time, and I didn't know that. So you see this need as a social worker in family court, and you're like, they're not even preparing me to testify on this important thing. So you say, I'm going to be a lawyer.
Right.
Do you say family court? What do you say? What informed your decisions while law school?
Well, I actually felt like you really need to go straight to the top. So I thought that
That's the problem.
it's the judge that makes the decision. So that's probably what I need to do. However, you have to be a lawyer first. So when I did enter law school, those were my thoughts, that I would enter in and I would come out and I would practice family law. And I believe, and it's anecdotal certainly, but so many people associate the law in terms of lay persons as, the criminal justice system, right? And there's a billion other things that, you deal with every day, right? That we all do. So I was laser focused on family law, but when you get there, you have to take everything. And my interest in various areas was then piqued. And I said, well, I can always do that. Let me think and see some other things that they have to offer. And the main thing, because I went to CUNY, City University of New York School of Law, what I saw, as Ms. Plater did, was many of the issues and the problems and what we were trying to interrupt as a law school, those things triggered not only my devotion to being an activist and seeing how you could use the law as a tool for social change, and a law school degree in the service of human needs. So I really, when I talk to students or whoever wants to talk or listen, it's really about what's in your hand to do. Whatever passion you have, how can you use the law as a tool and a mechanism for that? And so that's how it evolved in terms of my desire to be of use and to be impactful. And I would say, as to being a woman, I think all 3 years of law school, I had an internship with a firm, an all-male firm that did criminal defense and civil rights work in the Bronx. And I was committed. We had a great relationship, a lot of camaraderie. And so there was a student, law student like myself, and he came, and he was maybe, say I was gonna be a 3L, and he was a rising 2L. And after about a week, the attorney, the managing partner says, you're gonna second seat to this gentleman, right? I'm like, he's gonna second seat. I'm in the law library showing him which book to pick. I'm telling him how to clip decisions from the law journal. I'm helping him press F7 and do a brief, right? Because then you had to press F whatever function key. And you just got here. And the attorney manager was focused in on him out of all the other interns. It was 3 women and him. And said he was going to second seat. So, you know I had to address that, right? What precisely are you trying to accomplish in terms of his upward trajectory that you are not interested in making sure happens for the rest of us here, who have been here grinding for the past, I don't know, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 2 years, namely me? And he's like, totally clueless. He's like, what do you mean? I've been here forever, you know, prone exaggeration, but working hard, teaching. He doesn't know how to do anything, which is fine because he's here to learn. But how does he get to second seat? And he says, you know, I never really thought of it. Well, good thing you have me. So I think that sometimes you're in a space, and it may not be, it may just be an implicit bias. But to really ready this person in, you know, who's in the shape, form, or expectation that you have of who's going to lead, and maybe women don't figure into that, you know, box when you click that icon for you. Maybe Black people don't figure into that box. Maybe LGBT. So to really get in the midst of that and help people challenge their own assumptions, and that's one key memory I have of, I really think it came down to my gender, but alas, all is well, and everybody's more informed and more educated, and forever and ever, amen, I hope.
That's such a great memory for you to share because 1, you were courageous. 2, what if you hadn't spoken up? And 3, did you get to second seat?
Second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever. Yes. Thank
So when we're in those spaces, we should definitely speak up. Ms. Coleman, I don't know what drew you to the law. I would like to know that. And then I would like to know, how did your experience in law school inform your legal career? Because you were in a law firm for 20 years.
Long time. So I'm going to follow on one thing that I think you raised. But I went to law school never thinking I'd go to a firm. I had no lawyers in my family, but my mother was a teacher. There was no question that I was going to work. I think if you would have asked my father, he knew I was going to be a lawyer from a young age since I always argued, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, I actually would say that it was not until I got to a firm that I questioned that I couldn't do something, because that was just not in my DNA. But I went to law school thinking I was going to go the public interest route. I went to Columbia. Columbia's changed a lot since I was there, but certainly when I was there, there was a sense that, you know, in order to succeed, you went to a corporate law firm. And, you know, at least, and I think this still holds true today, if there are, you know, law students in the audience, go to a firm can afford to train you, and then you can decide what you want to do. And I think that's not terrible advice, but I spent my first year summer doing a public interest job. My second year summer, I did go to a firm. I went to a firm that does a lot of pro bono work. I ended up working on a large class action lawsuit that challenged, the qualifying exam for junior high and high school principals in the city school system. And we represented a class of essentially diverse people who had taken and failed the test. It was actually one of many generations of litigation where the tests were completely discriminatory. They asked questions like, who had the lead in the Mikado? Well, how would someone who perhaps did not have that kind of cultural upbringing know, nor was it in any way, shape, or form job related? Anyway, that case was brought when I was a summer. They continued to hire me my third year. The preliminary injunction got collapsed in a trial on the merits, and I worked on that case. And for better or for worse, and looking back, maybe a total rationalization, I would say, you know, I felt like, okay, I'm going to go to this firm, and I think I may be able to have a lot of impact on some big affirmative impact litigations with all the skills that I could get from working at a law firm. And it didn't hurt that I actually really loved the work. But I always knew I wanted to be a litigator. But that brings me to the point that, you know, I think is really important for a woman to hear. I think many women look at the qualifications for something and say, I don't have this particular amount of experience to do this. I can't be this particular kind of judge because I haven't done the 50 cases they say I need. And I think many men look at those qualifications and say, I can wing it. I can get there. There's a well-known joke about men saying they can breastfeed, but we don't need to go there.
I told you it was going to be good.
But so I do think a really important lesson, not just pointing out when you are not picked, but raising your hand. I think there is nothing more important than raising your hand. It is true, you totally need mentors, and we're gonna get there. But, so I think one of the things that helped me was actually in my class of summer associates then, there were not that many people who wanted to do litigation, and every single time I had the opportunity, I raised my hand, qualified or not. So I think that's an
So we
important
should
part.
definitely even raise our hands, even when we don't know if we want to raise our hands.
Yeah, I think you have to push yourself, totally. Yeah.
I'm going to stay with you. I like this back and forth, but I may just change it. So how, if at all, did your identity as a woman impact your decision to study the law and pursue a legal career? Did it even have an impact?
I mean, again, I would go back to saying, like, it didn't dawn on me that that anybody would be concerned that I was a woman and I couldn't do the job. That certainly came up, and but I think I felt always that, you know, what attracted me was the ability to make change, the ability to identify problems. I think women happen to be very good at, you know, organizing people to affect change. I do think you need the underlying skills, but I also think you said lift while you climb. I think you need women who are going to share their experiences and include you in whatever it may be, the next big case, et cetera. I have the first woman lawyer who made partner at the firm I started out with, when I was a 4th or 5th year associate in an associate review with her, said to me that you cannot have children and do this job. And I was like, whoa. I'm hoping I'm going to have children someday, but she happened to be a woman who came up at a time when she was one of very few women, and she looked at the world in a very black and white way. And to her credit, when she was in her, I believe, late 40s, she was married, had had no children. I was just about to make partner. She decided to leave the practice of law. She adopted 2 kids from South America.
God bless her.
She turned to me and said, you know, you should do this trademark stuff. It could lead to something someday, which was actually quite impactful on my career ultimately. But she was somebody who believed that. I mean, I think the whole like family side of it is something to talk about for women, and but yeah.
I think we all often hear you can't be a successful attorney and have a family and have it all. And I think that's bogus. I agree with Ms. Coleman. With Susan. I agree with Susan that women have too much work, but we do it so well. You know, so they just keep adding to the plate. Judge Saunders, do you believe that your identity as a woman of color, if at all, impacted your decision to study law and pursue a legal career?
I don't believe it did. And I say that because, you know, I'm one of 8 children, and I'm the bossy one, I'm the youngest.
That's shocking.
And so, you know, I just like wrangle situations into submission. But to the extent I ever had hesitation about navigating anything, it really wasn't based on my gender. It was my race that I thought would be a problem for people. And I still think that's true to a large degree. And what I found was that, yes, that was true. And then being a woman, and being young, or being perceived as much, much younger than I was. So it didn't and wasn't going to stop me, but I never had even room in my mind for that. I was just like, well, you know, this is how it's been all these years I've been alive. I've been black, so, you know, I may as well go to the next thing. Is if you let that stop you, you know, you stay in your bed in the fetal position, because it definitely impacts everything that you do in this country.
Ms. Plater, do you believe that your identity as a woman of color, if at all, impacted your decision to study law or pursue a legal career?
So I went to Harry S. Truman in the Bronx. I came in the middle of the 11th grade. And when I got to Harry S. Truman, I was placed in the Advanced Placement English Literature program and the Advanced Placement History program. I also, I just kind of followed the crowd because all the kids had known each other from 9th grade, right? They had developed relationships. So what they started to do is what I started to do. And some of the programs that they were in were programs where, like for example, the law team. So I joined the law team, right? And we started to do programs where there was like mentoring. And some of the women mentors that came to Harry S. Truman influenced me. And they started talking to me about what it was I wanted to do for a career. Fast forward to Queens College. That program, there, you know, I wanted to go to Columbia University, right? When I graduated from Harry S. Truman, I graduated with some crazy number like 15 awards in a year and a half. And money was an issue because my sister, myself, and my mom were all 3 of us were in college. So my father, and I did put up a fight. I wasn't always the compliant child.
I could tell.
But he said, why not go to Queens College? Of course, I wanted to hear nothing of it because my heart was set on Columbia. It was the best decision of my life because what that did was put me in a school, in a borough, with Indians, Indian women. None of them were pursuing the law, but they were pursuing something, mostly the medical field. So I don't think that it really informed, being a woman informed, or being an Indian woman informed my decision to enter law school. But what I think did was being around my peers that looked like me, who were also engaging in some greater level of discourse, right? So with them, I knew I had the courage. I went through all the concepts of fear and pursued what I wanted to pursue. And I think that being there allowed me to do that. And it informed my decision more than being an Indian woman or a woman.
Do you believe that your identity as a woman of color had an impact on your decision to go to law school and pursue law?
You know, it's interesting as I've been hearing the other really wonderful answers from panelists, and I'm thinking to myself, when did I actually develop the language, right, to explain my identity as a woman of color and also all of the other intersectional identities, right, that I have with me, that we all carry with us, right? And I don't think that I had that when I was first starting off college. But I think the experience of being a woman of color, first of all, it's something that I have with me every day, right? But also it's something that I really felt acutely in high school, even if I only realized it in hindsight, right? I think I mentioned a little earlier, I went to an all-girls high school in Brooklyn. And while I was there, right before my senior year, an alum of the school who was a solo practitioner, offered an internship to myself and to 3 other young women for a couple of weeks that summer before my senior year of high school. And I never would have had that opportunity if I had not gone to this same all-girls high school by coincidence. And then when I went to college, it was thinking more not just about my identity as a woman, but really thinking about my identity as a Latina, which is something that I had not had the opportunity to really think about because I looked at my family, we were all Panamanian, I looked at my neighborhood, it was heavily Latino, and so it's not, I don't think you have the opportunity to realize that and really grow until you're out of the bubble, and then you look back and you say, oh, it actually did have a huge influence on me. So while in the moment, I would have said, no, I don't think that it had any effect on me as a woman or a woman of color. As I look back on my past and I look back on where I've been, absolutely, the influence is there.
So throughout our conversation tonight, I keep hearing about women and how other women have impacted us, right? We all have that. I started my legal career with Judge Pitt in a purple office at the Legal Aid Society, and we're here together in 81, and we've been through so much, and it's so important for us to support one another. I just read an article called Americans' Teenage Girls Are Not Okay. The rising teen anxiety is a national crisis. In that vein, have you benefited from being mentored by women? What advice would you give anyone, not just students, anyone in this audience watching us that wants to seek mentorship?
So I want to touch briefly on the article, which I think is so poignant. So I sit on the board of the Sonia and Selena Sotomayor Judicial Internship Program, and I'm the vice president of the high school division, which means that I work with 16-year-olds over the summer who intern with state and federal judges and who are interested in one day becoming lawyers, becoming judges, et cetera. And so absolutely, I see the importance of mentorship there, right? I see it with them, and they are living, breathing testament to the importance of one single step. We actually did have 2 students from Harry S. Truman High School last year, and which is really wonderful and something that we care a lot about, making sure that students who have had opportunities and have gone to really prestigious high schools have opportunities, but also students who go to their local high schools, especially young women who maybe don't know as much about the law, don't know as much about what a judge does, but they have the drive, right? And they have that, they just need a little bit of a push. And I think at some point or another, we all need that little bit of a push. And it doesn't matter whether we are high school, high school girls, or whether we're fully fleshed adults. I think that we all need to rely on each other, and I think that's part of the joy of community, especially communities like this, really bringing people together.
What do you say to someone that wants you to be their mentor? Do they wait for you to talk to them? Do they come to you?
They should come to me. I feel like a lot of the work that I do with the high school kids is sort of being like, okay, well, I'm from Brooklyn, I went to Harvard, but I'm here, right? Like, I don't want you to be intimidated or scared, especially when they learn that I do alumni admissions and alumni interviews. And then they're like, can you get me into Harvard? And I'm like, no, that's not how this works. That's not how this works. But in any event, I love mentoring, right? I love being a mentor to the high school kids that I work with. I'm still a non-resident tutor, so I work with the college kids, I work with the law school kids. And when I say kids, many of my students are older than I am at Columbia, right? I had the opportunity, and I know, Judge, you were talking about having a young face, right? Like, I understand that feeling, and also, feeling like you have a lot to contribute regardless of your age. So what I would say to someone who wants to be mentored by me is, let's find a time. I love iced coffee. Let's meet up, and let's talk.
My kind of girl, I love iced coffee. Ms. Plater, what do you say about being mentored and giving advice to those that want to be mentored?
So I think that there's formal mentorship and there is informal mentorship, right? I have benefited from both of those categories of mentorship. I have mentors from the Franklin H. Williams Commission. I have mentors from the MBBA Judicial Training Academy. Judge Toussaint is my mentor. And from the Franklin H. Williams Commission, Judge April Newbar, and they've been wonderful mentors. There've been instances where only a mentor could answer the question that I had. I have gotten to that stage in my life, in my career, where only a mentor who have traveled that course, that path, can answer that question. Now let's talk about the young girls. As you all know, I'm the president of the Bronx Women's Bar Association, and we do many programs for young girls. I also volunteer with other organizations, such as Girls Rule the Law. We've done partner programs. I've traveled quite a bit, and wherever I go, I gravitate to the girls. I gravitate to the girls who look like me and the girls who don't look like me. My husband is here, and he's taken all the pictures, and he's oftentimes amazed. But they want to talk to me as much as I want to talk to them. Because even when I don't approach them, they run up to me. And it's just an amazing thing that has happened in my life. So, but to fully answer your question about the importance of mentorship, I think that as mentors, as women who have gotten to a certain position in their career, you ought to seek out young girls. You should not wait for them to come to you. They will come to you, but because of intimidation, because of fear, they won't always feel that it's okay to approach you. Listen, we all know that there are women who are unapproachable, okay?
We're not talking about those.
But I'm just saying that because of that, there are young women, young girls especially, right, who are not going to come to you. So when you see them, you don't have to go and lay some heavy stuff on them. Just go chat, take a chat.
Judge Saunders, I know for a fact you've been a mentor to many young people. Have you benefited from mentorship? And what advice would you give students that are seeking mentorship?
I certainly have benefited from mentorship. Some people don't even know they're mentoring you, but they are. I think you should always strive to be, a shining example for others to follow, because people emulate, your style, your approach, and it may not be something that you even realize until maybe an opportunity comes where they share that with you. I know that there were a lot of people, and I didn't really appreciate it, but they were like, you wear your hair natural, and I never thought that a judge could do that. So all the days, like my example in my mind of what that meant for so many years, that's just, so you're just going to work, right? You're just being who you are, and it does have an impact. So I say that definitely, and I've been mentored, and I have appreciated and benefited from those who I just watch how they operate. I also think that, mentorship can be, as Ms. Plater said, formal and informal, but it also doesn't necessarily have to be defined as such, in the sense that I think you should reach out. I think you should use every opportunity to do so in your, everyday interactions. And I would say that it is critically important to be approachable, because if someone is thinking about approaching you and there's an air of either distance, they are not necessarily going to take that opportunity, and it can certainly be a missed opportunity that may impact their life. And even any of us, where you're just like, whoa, I couldn't really reach out to Susan. Okay, maybe that's not a route I'm gonna take, right? Perhaps, like, you just don't really realize the impact that can have. So I would say, to answer your question, yes, I have been mentored, and yes, I believe mentorship is critical, but it also doesn't necessarily have to be that formal to be impactful.
Susan, did
Yeah.
you benefit from mentorship?
I definitely did. I think, and a lot has already been said. One thing I think I would highlight, I think you need a lot of different kinds of mentors. I don't think you just need mentors who look like you. You need mentors who don't look like you. You need mentors who are at your level, who are more senior than you. And I think you need to recognize, and this isn't always so easy, and I think in my current vantage point, maybe I've come to appreciate it even more, that I don't know what it's like to walk in the shoes of a woman of color. I have had my experience, but I am not going to necessarily be, I'm going to be a certain kind of mentor, but I want that person to have you as a mentor. And so a big part of the role is recognizing that and connecting people to each other. But I do think it is critically important to have lots of mentors. And I know we're talking about mentorship, but there's also sponsorship, and that's a whole other part of it. And I think of a much more active role to sponsor someone. And in my, great privilege of being the president of the city bar, I will say that I think the state court judges are amazing in their mentorship of one another, which is palpable. You may not feel it, but when you all get together, I think to myself, like, this is what these law firms need. But also, I think there's sponsorship in a way that there isn't in some other parts of the profession.
You and Judge Saunders, I think, hit the ball out of the park in terms of anyone can be a mentor. I've had mentor. Judge Betty Ellerin, who's going to be 95, is a mentor. I've had Judge Juanita Bing Newton. My very own Judge Bahati Pitt can be my mentor at times. My PJ, Darcel Clark. I mean, mentorship can come in so many ways, and you just have to be open to it. Judge Werner Saunders, I don't want to single you out, but I am. Okay. You are the amazing president of the I want to get the initials right, AASGANY. How many women judges are members, and how many women judges do we have in New York State, if you know, Judge Saunders?
let's see. I did do this math. It was on a day I had a little bit more energy, but alas. Let's see. The total of justices of the Supreme Court, and the statistics are broken up into New York City and beyond, right? So there's 304 as of, I believe, the August 2023 statistics that I reviewed. 85 women in New York City, 61 women outside of New York City, for a total of 146. So women justices in New York State, 48.02%. I think the follow-up question were how many women were members of the association?
Yes.
And that would be, of the 146, 85, which would be 58.2% of the justices.
Bernadette, Judge, my boss is telling me to tell you to speak up.
Oh,
I
I'm
do what she
sorry.
says.
I'm on the mic, okay. Well, to recap quickly, that might be overkill. Is this better? Okay, 304 justices, 146 are women for the entire state, 48.2% of women justices in New York State of the total, right, 48.2. Of the 146 that are women, 85 women association members. I believe that was the follow-up part of the question, which would account for 58.2%. But our immediate past president, Barbara Kapnick, is here. Presidents have associations.
Supreme Court justices have been women. We alternate upstate,
Downstate.
and the
It's
past
amazing.
4 of us have been women.
Yes. So that in and of itself is mentorship, right? To see the example to follow, to have a pattern card of exemplary, leadership, and to really feel, I guess, capable, and also to see how it's done, and to also have those past presidents as a resource to everything that you're trying to do and things that they wanted to do and seek that should be done. I think that's a powerful testament in and of itself.
So it seems like in some areas the women are like killing it, right? I could just talk about my court. We have 21 judges and 13 are women, and our PJ is a woman. But I'm starting to notice as I work with the bar associations that we're starting to get less young ladies that join the bar, and that may be for different reasons. So my question is to you, ma'am, and it's, on an average, do you find that law students who identify as women are attending law school and graduating at greater rates than their male counterparts? And the second follow-up is, are they obtaining judicial clerkships?
Yeah, so that's a wonderful question. So I looked at Columbia, where I work, and then I looked at the national statistics. And so Columbia, like many law schools across the country, actually skews towards women and non-binary students. So it is about 54% women and non-binary students, which is, again, really, really wonderful. But then you look at the judicial clerkship numbers, and there's a little bit more to be desired, right? So NALP, which puts together the demographics and also takes surveys of graduating law school graduates, noted the clerkship statistics from 2006 to 2016. And for women, it ended up being that we actually went down in terms of clerkships. So in 2006, 53.1% of clerkships at both the federal and the state level were held by women. And in 2016, it was 50.5. So we're seeing a decrease. And then the other thing that I thought was really significant, and we've talked a little bit about our various identities, especially as women of color, in my demographic, right, Hispanic / Latina women, 2% of all clerkships were held in 2016, right? The numbers have not really gone up. And so while we're seeing enormous progress, especially at the state level, at the federal level, we're really seeing a lot of change. There are a lot of numbers that are still lagging behind, especially when we consider the various identities that people might have in addition to being women.
Ms. Plater, do you see a difference in the members that join the Bar Association in terms of, are we getting more women members? Are we getting less women members? Are younger women attorney caring to join the Bar Association versus not?
Well, we just had an election, so I'm primed to answer that question. um, and before the election, we actually went out and sought less seasoned lawyers, younger women. Like, this was my strategy. I wanted to see different kinds of diversity. So, prosecution, defense, legal aid, nonprofit, right?
You're doing a great job, Ms. Plater.
18B assigned counsel. So I literally sat down and mapped out all the different areas. And then I asked my current board to go out and look and see who would possibly be interested in their community, in their courthouse, and send them in. And we were actually very successful this year because we have a younger board. I'm thrilled.
You have 2 board members that are pregnant. You are killing it. The women in the Bronx Women's Bar are doing their thing, Ms. Plater.
Well, thank
Great
you very much. But really, it's a group collaborative success, right? Some of our board members are here. Some of our incoming board members are here. And one of the things that I was really concerned about is succession planning. So not just for today, not just for next year, but for the future of the organization as I depart and wrap up my 2 years as president. I think it ties into mentorship. It really does. Because our board members went out, they looked around them, and they thought, okay, this person may be great for the board. This person may be great for the organization. And they pitched it, right? I think it all ties in.
Susan, I know that you're president of one of the largest bar association, but my question for you is, do you see a difference in the law firm? Do you see more young women applicants applying, retaining their job, or do you see less? You spoke about a partner that was there, and then there was you.
Right.
Did that change? Do you see any changes?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there certainly 50% plus of the law schools are women. I think the entry level, some are associate classes, and I'm way overgeneralizing, but many of the entry level associate classes, that continues. But then I think when you get to the equity ranks of the partnership, it does not continue, and I think it's even, way worse for people of color. I don't have any answers for that. Some of it, I think we don't do a good enough job about speaking about all the benefits of and satisfaction of being a lawyer and the career and all that. But I mean, obviously there are trade-offs, but it's a huge issue. I think it's been pretty stagnant over the last many years, and I don't think, with all due respect to the Supreme Court, the SFFA decision is going to help.
This means we got a lot more work to do.
We got a
right,
lot
Susan?
more work to do. And I do want to Brett Parker is here, the executive director of the City Bar. We have
Thank you for being with us.
but we have 23,000-ish members of the City Bar, just on the issue of young lawyers. I don't know where our numbers are, but we try hard to have law students join committees, and we have lots of events for them. And I do think, this could be a whole other panel, but young people who have come through COVID have a hard time showing up. I think the firms have experienced that, and I think that's an issue. But I don't know, Brett, numbers-wise, not to put you on the spot.
I don't have numbers, other than there's been a real effort to diversify our membership and our board. Our board is incredibly diverse. I think more than 50% of our board are either female or from historically underrepresented
We're proud too.
But I think there's a lot more work to be done. I think it's important for people who look like me to be supportive of that effort.
Thank you for saying that.
This conversation is fantastic. I'm learning so much from all of you.
So I want to leave some times for questions. So before I do that, I want to end with this question. I can only speak for myself. You know, no matter what age you are, there's always that person that's going to hate on you, that's going to say, you don't look right, that those pearls aren't good. Why did you wear that yellow blazer? You know what I'm talking about. No matter what age, Savina, I love your blazer, okay? No matter what age we are, we're always going to have that person that's hating, that's making us second guess ourselves. What I've learned after the age of 50, which is a great age, over 50, I think, is that I'm my worst critic. I'm my worst hater. That no one can make me feel worse about me than me. So in that vein, I want to know, what would you say to your younger self? Knowing everything you've been through to get to this day, this night, in this seat, what would you say to your younger self? Sorry, Susan, I have to start with you.
God.
You want me to start on that end? Because she seems like she's ready. Oh, sorry. She just gave me the Latina roll your eyes look. We're going back to you, Susan. Please.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think, look, I'm older than you are, and I am incredibly proud of the career that I have had. I am incredibly grateful to have had the opportunity to be a lawyer. And I was very concerned about it. So to my younger self, although, you know, as I said before, I feel like I was someone who raised my hand and spoke up. You know, I think being able to say to my younger self that I would be able to have a very meaningful profession, give back, contribute, and, you know, have a family, which is incredibly important to me, is, you know, just chill out, I guess.
Chill out and you can do it, girl. Chill out and you're going to do it.
Exactly. Yeah.
I like it. Judge Saunders, I can't wait to hear what you have to
It's
say.
not so profound. It's more so like something that I really believe even now. And I think because I had 7 brothers and sisters, you know, I was like, well, they're going to chuckle. But I was like, you're going to be fine. Because, like, look at 1 through, you know, look at 1 through 7. No, they tease me all the time. But they very much so, and my parents, my mom and dad, they kept us very, very grounded. And so I always said, and I'm a very positive person, things are going to work out, right? And I it's not that I don't get stressed. It's not that, like, one year I gave up
I've
worrying.
never seen you stressed, Verna.
Well,
Never.
great. You know, but I gave up worrying for Lent. I was like, what are you worried about? Like, that's what I'm giving up. I'm giving up. That's my life. So things will work out. And I would say that telling your, you know, younger self that, they are not going to believe it because they're headstrong. But that is something that I do believe, that things will work out. And that is something that my family, that's the gift that they gave me, right? We're going to be together and everything's going to work out.
Ms. Plater, what would you say to your younger self in your fabulous yellow blazer?
I just wanted to say, even if you didn't like it, that was all right.
That's my girl. That's my girl.
But, you know, those grueling days in Guyana, after school, I would come home and I'd have to study again, right? Because my dad was a teacher. And before he became the politician, it was difficult in my household because there was pressure. Pressure to get to the top high school. I think the West Indians in the crowd get it, okay? I would tell my younger self to trust him, to trust that he knows the path that he's taken me on, this journey. I mentioned I wasn't always compliant, and I think that that made it a little harder for me.
We want to know what you would say to your younger self.
You know, as I sit here, I really reflect on all these enormous privileges that I have had. And I would tell my younger self, live in the moment. I spent a lot of high school thinking about what I was going to do about college. I spent a lot of college thinking about what was going to come next. I spent in law school thinking, what am I going to do 1L summer? 2L summer, I was also at a big law firm, and they gave me a return offer. So I knew that I was going to do that. And that same year, I got my clerkship with Chief Judge Brody over in the EDNY, who's also, speaking of mentors, a fantastic one, right? But I knew what I was going to do for the next couple of years of my life. Go to the firm, go clerk. And when I finished my clerkship, I realized it was the first time, maybe in 10 years, maybe ever, that I didn't have something right afterwards. Something that I would say, oh, I know exactly where I'm going to be. Which is part of the reason I ended up here at Columbia, right? Because when push came to shove and I had the opportunity to do exactly what I wanted, I realized that what I wanted to do was spend more time mentoring students and spend more time teaching and spend more time in this system of higher education where often the students have already gotten there, but there's a big difference between them getting there and them succeeding, right? And I wanted to be part of that. And so ultimately, when I think back to my younger self, I would tell her, live in the moment, because at the end of the day, what mattered the most to me, and looking back at all of these incredible experiences, I would give them all up if it, for more time with my family, right? Without my mom and my dad, that would have been so difficult. My great grandma, who's, en el cielo, my goddaughter and her mom, who's like a sister to me. Ultimately, that's what's gonna be remembered, right? Forget the schools, forget the degrees. That's really what comes down to. So think about that,
Beautiful way to end this, right? So now we're going to open it up for questions. Does anybody have any questions? She may need the mic back there. Thanks. Oh my God, I feel like we're on TV.
Hello. It's on. Hi, I'm one of the court attorneys here, and I have two children. They are, one just turned 6. My little guy is going to be 4 on Wednesday. So one thing that I really struggle with as a young-ish lawyer is finding time to do it all, and to be present with my kids, but also be a good lawyer. I do have higher aspirations, but figuring out how to get there without also sacrificing family time is, as you mentioned, is incredibly important too, has been my struggle. So do you have any things that, have helped you in your careers that you could pass on to some of us younger attorneys with young families?
Well, I will tell you one story. So when I was a 3rd or 4th year associate, I already mentioned that review where they said you couldn't have kids and do this job. All the women associates got together because there was a lot of discussion. At that point, there were no part-time. You couldn't work at a firm part-time. Talk about what kind of policy the firm should have. And what became clear immediately was the last thing anybody wanted was a policy, because we all wanted something slightly different. But I also discovered that, so I got pregnant, my first kid. I had my first 2 kids as an associate, my 3rd kid as a partner. Was people were afraid to ask. And I did ultimately, so I had my son at the end of July, I came back in December. In April, I said to the firm that I wanted to work part-time. It's not gonna sound like part-time, but I worked 5 days a week, basically 9 to 6 every day. But that was because, for me, I wanted to be home for dinner and a bath time. And I stayed part-time and made partner that way. And I didn't know it at the time, but there was a huge discussion at the firm about, is she totally committed, blah, blah, blah. And I was working more hours, I'm sure, than many of the male associates for whom that question did not come up. That is all to say, your career is going to be over a long period of time. Have confidence in yourself. You are probably very capable as a court attorney here. And there may be some time when things are not going to be totally devoted. I mean, there's always that time when your kid gets sick and it's the worst day for you not to be able to be there, but I think you have to take the long view and have enough confidence that, you know, and for me, when I kept saying, like, am I gonna come up for partner? And I was like, hemming and hawing. I'm like, I can take it, just tell me, am I on the bus or off the bus? And it's that kind of question, so I think having the perspective is really important. The other thing is, you know, don't kill yourself over being perfect at all things. It's just not gonna always work out perfectly every single day, but in the long run, it's going to be amazing, and your kids are going to be super proud of you to have the career that you have, and they're going to turn out to be better people who are going to contribute a ton to the world. So you may not be able to have it all at the same time, but I think you can totally do both.
Yes, I think so too. One of the questions I had for one of my mentors, who was Judge Fisher, when I first applied to become a judge. I've been on the bench now about 16 years. And when my son was 1 when I first applied to be a housing court judge. And I was job sharing, which is essentially working part-time. And I was like, are they gonna consider my application, seriously, because I'm, 50%? And she's like, yeah, like, absolutely. Like, why would they not? So I was like, because they won't. But I listened, right? Because that's why you ask questions, because you don't know the answer. So I moved forward, and before I was appointed, I did come back to work full-time, because even though that was the answer, and I believe it was, accurate, I didn't believe it. So I came back to work full-time, and when I was appointed, he was 2. And so I had to really be strict on how much time I spent away from home. I just basically finished nursing type thing. And I would come in, and I had a good support system, like my husband, great, that I'm gonna go to work on Saturdays, but I'm going to get there at 7, and I'm going to leave at 2, and I'm going to do that to accomplish what I feel like I can't, because I'm leaving at 5:30 in order to pick him up by 6:30. So I did have to put some things in place, and I had to have reliable folks, right? So if you have household help or you have family members you can count on. But I remember when I was running for judge, he was a little older, he might have been 5. And he thought it was so mysterious and secret and fun, because I was never home. And he was just like, I was like, well, so I said, you're gonna be my campaign manager. And I started taking to him things. He was like, this is so boring. Right, yes, perfect. I'm not having a whole bunch of fun. But when I would petition and I would do different things, he would get people to stop who wouldn't stop for the Pope. I mean, he was just excellent, right? He was my secret weapon. So you just bring them in. That was what I felt. Bring them in to what you're doing as much as you can when you can. And I don't know if they've invented it yet. You're gonna feel guilty. I don't know if there's an antidote to that, but it is going to work out. And I did have an honest conversation when he got a little bit mature, and I thought about it. And it was a question that the Women's Bar asked me in one of my interviews in the screening, like, well, what's like your biggest regret? I regret the time that I wasn't there, and I really, really, really worried about it. And he gave me permission. He said, Mommy, it's okay. And that was when he was older, but it sí se puede. It can be done.
Oh, nice.
I've been waiting for you to know. But you're gonna feel how you're gonna feel, but it is still okay.
So I just want to add to that. It flies. Enjoy your babies. It flies. Before you know it, they're going to be in college and want no parts of you. I have my first son. 3 days later, I started 3rd year of law school. So he grew up with me in the career. I took him to the court, just like she said. Took him to the courts. One of them is a court officer today, because he said, Ma, I lived in the courts. This is what you did to me, right? And I took them campaigning, and I took them to bar association stuff, right? There's a way. One thing I wish I had known earlier was, if you keep the school, the job, and the home in the same vicinity, you can actually go over there at lunchtime when they're getting their certificates, and you can do mock trial too. But it took me a long time to understand that. I don't know if we have time for another question, do we? Because, you know, Judge Patriot Fears Cologne sent me a question. Does someone else have a question? She's like, can you speak up in the audience? Judge Cologne from Brooklyn.
Here we go. Well, first I want to thank each of you all for such a candid and important conversation tonight. Thank you for that. I actually graduated from law school almost 20 years ago here in New York, and I took a more non-traditional route in the law, but I still managed to have, but I still managed, thank you. I still managed to have an older daughter here who loves the law and tells me all the time that she would like to be a lawyer and a judge as well. And so my question is really maybe two parts. She's currently valedictorian of her 8th grade class. Wow. And it's an all-girls charter school here in Manhattan, and so she is now going on to high school where it's a co-ed school. So this will be her first time in an ecos of boys and so, co-ed. So my question is maybe some advice for her on how to deal both collaborative and competitive in her new ecosystem of high school.
Selena Sotomayor.
And part two of that question, and again on her behalf, would be that she also, in addition to the law, she's interested in journalism as well as filmmaking and other subjects. And so, would you all encourage, you know, as she starts high school, or you know, and still love the law, but encourage other interests in developing that as she goes through? Thank you.
First of all, congratulations on being valedictorian. That's wonderful. Congratulations. So in terms, is this on? All right. So in terms of my advice going from an all-girls cohort to a co-ed one, which I did myself when I went from high school to college, my advice is focus on yourself, regardless of whether you're in an all-girls school, an all-boys school, co-ed, focus on yourself. High school is a really, really tough place sometimes, right? And I think even the people who have the best experiences, there are a lot of growing pains, there are a lot of moments of learning, and I think being confident in who you are, as cliched as it may sound, is going to be really important when everything else is moving around you, right? Because in the middle of the storm, right, in the eye of the hurricane, it's just you. And regardless of how much you might change and think about, oh, that was so cringy, why did I do that? Maybe that's just me and I'm projecting, but you know, like when I think back to those moments, ultimately, all of those people will live inside you, right? Because the version of you that is 13 years old will live inside the version of you that is 18 years old and 25 years old and 40 years old and 80 years old, right? So I think ultimately, it's okay to make mistakes. I think the most important thing is just staying true to who you are in that process, regardless of who else is in your class. But also make friends, right? And we've talked about mentorship, but sometimes mentors can be your friends and friends can be your mentors. Sometimes mentors might end up being people who are younger than you are. And so, you know, embrace all of that. And when it comes to the other, you know, interests that you have, explore them. They are so important. You know, in addition to the law, I spend a lot of time creative writing. I love to write, and I think that it is such a wonderful complement to the work that I do. And you will find that in moments of stress, it's those things that sometimes keep you going. And sometimes you'll find that those teach you really valuable skills that will then lead you to a really wonderful profession. So regardless of whatever you decide to do, try to do it well, have fun in the process, pay attention to your parents. So that's my advice.
Can I add? Yeah. Okay. I think the focus on journalism will actually help you in the law. I think that the more broad focused you are, you'll be a better lawyer. I certainly think it happened for me because when I was at Truman, the great high school of Truman, not only did I do the law team, but I played competitive tennis for the school. I swam on the swim team for the school. And I took acting classes as well. I took piano classes at Truman. And I think all of those helped to build me into the person that I am today. First of all, my husband can tell you that fear is something that is only momentary with me. And I think it's because of all of the broad-minded focus of things that I've done. Like I've created my identity, I've created myself. And it was away from being Indian, it was away from being a woman, it was just things that I was interested in. You know, I loved Renaissance art, so I started painting. It's all these things, and I think that your journalism interest is something that you should definitely pursue. It'll help you with your writing, it will help you with your oratory skills, and that's something that you need in court, right? Both of those you need in court. So
You
carry
can be a
on.
journalist and a lawyer and then a judge. Are we done? Because I got more questions, but it's 7:28 and I don't want any problems. Okay. Thank you, ladies.
We could clearly go on forever. This has been such a wonderful conversation, and I thank all of our excellent speakers for sharing their really motivational stories, their experiences that I think are so helpful for young women, young girls in the 8th grade, as well as law students who I hope will watch this, as well as young attorneys, and those who just have these kinds of questions that, you know, there's no one to ask. So I just think this was a wonderful discussion. Thank you for sharing your personal stories. Judge Jeanette Rosado, thank you for the wonderful questions. Wonderful moderator. Susan Coleman of the City Bar, thank you so much. Judge Verna Saunders, thank you so much for your leadership. Savina Plater, thank you for being here. Excellent, excellent shared stories. And Diana's Beth, I'm going to mispronounce, Acqui. Thank you. Thank you so much, all of you. Hopefully we can continue this another evening. Thanks for being here.